There is a new sex trend that is taking the internet by storm. Have you heard of it? Gooning. Gooning is a self-pleasure activity. Well, for some it's more of a headspace. For others it's more of a lifestyle, and for some, all of the above. It's centered around extreme edging that results in an intense, trance-like euphoric state known as goon state. And when I say extreme, I mean extreme, like this intense pleasure without the O can go on for hours, even days. Zipper Magazine. Hi, I'm Sunny Megatron, sexologist, certified sexuality and kink educator, and editor-in-chief of the kink-focused Zipper Magazine. Sometimes referred to as gooning and baiting, some people say that gooning feels almost spiritual, like an otherworldly state of near orgasmic intoxication where you get completely lost in your desires and your fantasies and your sensation. And the only thing that matters is the direct connection between all of the concentration and focus that your brain can muster to everything else just doesn't exist. I know exactly what you're thinking, right? You're like, well, isn't that edging, right? Getting yourself to the verge of an O over and over and then backing off. And okay, what's the big deal? Now I get where you're coming from, but think of it this way. If edging is power walking, then gooning is running a 26.2 mile marathon with your pants off. What separates gooning from edging is the approach, the mindset, and for some, the identity and the lifestyle that goes along with it. Typically, edging is more about self-control, delaying the O, so that results in more intense arousal, desire, and ultimately climax. And for those that are kinky, edging can be a way to play with control in a power exchange dynamic. Gooning, on the other hand, is more about letting go of control, of distractions, of the stresses of everyday life, and instead immersing yourself in this primal lizard brain-esque experience wholly and completely. Mentally, you go blank. You lose the ability to communicate in any kind of discernible language. I mean, I guess there's a reason they say it's like a religious experience. You're speaking in tongues, but the good kind of tongues, You babble. You drool. You make absolutely ridiculous faces. Everything you are and your entire reality is made up of and controlled by that. Now, hold up. Before I dive further into this extreme form of self-pleasure, I've got to jump in with some important context here. Keep this in mind. Anytime there is a new sex trend that is taking the internet by storm, as gooning seems to be, that means that all those online magazines and content creators and media platforms that are covering this hot new sex trend, they benefit by emphasizing the most outrageous and unbelievable details, because the more sensationalized, the more shocking, the better the chances are that you're going to be intrigued enough to click to learn more. And sometimes people sensationalize those details not because outrageous hook or headline gets more views, but because, whether they realize it or not, drawing conclusions or making false equivalencies or giving opinions based on their very limited understanding of a sexual practice or a community that they aren't a part of, it supports their own beliefs and their own assumptions. Somewhere around here, you're going to see links to related videos. And I would bet that some of those videos likely have a pretty sex-negative flavor to them. They might make fun of or call people that are into gooning sick or porn addicted or they're out of control. Those kinds of sex-negative sentiments are in line with those of communities like NoFap. Now, that is a whole nother rabbit hole to go down, by the way, and that's a whole nother video. But see my other video on No Nut November? It's kind of related. Needless to say, there are a lot of assumptions floating out there about gooning that just aren't true. This skewed understanding of what gooning is has led to this widespread misbelief that every single person who goons, they are all young, straight, cis men who can't get girlfriends, they're kind of incel-y, right? And they are hopelessly addicted to porn and masturbation to the point where they've quit their jobs. They are disconnected from any outside contact, any hobbies, their responsibilities. They now live in their parents' basement, which they have turned into what's known as a goon cave. That's an unkempt, smelly room filled with dirty Kleenexes, repurposed sticky, dirty socks, a 55-gallon drum of lube in the corner, probably leaking all over your mom's carpet, right? There are screens all around playing adult videos over and over on a loop like it is an X-rated version of the NASA control room. No. I mean, if that's your fantasy, cool to role play it. Get on with your bad self, but that's not really what's happening. First, gooning is enjoyed by all sorts of people. Doesn't matter if you're gay, straight, trans, cis, you're single, you're a couple, a throuple, whatever, you name it, all sorts of people do it. Of course, on the internet, straight men get the spotlight for lots of reasons. That's a whole nother video, but they certainly aren't the only ones out there in the gooniverse. And for many, this is a quite social community. Yes, I said community. You only have to go as far as Reddit to see what I'm talking about. The most popular gooning subreddit has nearly 1 million members. And there are many others too, with thousands, some hundreds of thousands of members. Subreddits and forums and groups for couples, for women, for queer folks, and it goes on and on and on. It's like Rule 34. Is there a Rule 34 of subreddits? Like if you can think of it, there's a subreddit of it, because that's what it's like with gooning. And yes, many of these groups exist solely to share content and other titillating information. But there are others centered around sharing educational information, advice discussions, or that serve as a hub for educational enthusiasts to socialize and connect in a non-goon space headspace. There are even virtual and in-person gooning get-togethers. In Zipper Magazine's video with Goddess Rosie Reed, she talked about Airbnb baits. This is where people will rent out a place for the weekend and host gooning events where they goon together. And there's so many other websites and forums and Discord groups dedicated to gooning too. Okay, but you're like, but what about the porn addiction thing? Aren't all of these people gooning because they are hopelessly addicted to porn? Isn't that bad? Now, it's true that some people into gooning call themselves pornosexuals or solosexuals who exist just to whack it to adult material or their own fantasy playground in their mind. And when talking about their fantasies, some might emphasize their lack of human skin-to-skin connection, or they might incorporate distress or humiliation over that in their fantasy banter. But did you catch it? Did you catch what I just said? I said fantasy. That is an important key word. Looking at why people are into gooning and what they get out of it will shed some light on the association of porn addiction with the gooning community. We only have to go as far as looking at the psychology behind eroticism and human sexuality. Being powerless. We see this as a theme over and over in erotic fantasies. Being powerless to the whims of someone or something else can give us permission to let go fully and uninhibitedly experience our true pleasure. Authentically embodying your pleasure is a really hard thing to do, being socialized in a culture that is so centered around shame. And it doesn't matter your gender, your sexuality, or anything else, all of us wrestle with shame to one extent or another. And so one way to get out from under shame's thumb is to tap into uninhibited pleasure by indulging in fantasies that take us out of the driver's seat. The subconscious rationale is, well, if some highly sexual, really dirty thing was my idea, well, doesn't that mean I'm some weirdo perv that should be ashamed of myself? If I'm influenced or intoxicated by larger forces, it's not my fault or my idea. I'm off the hook. And with that shame and blame out of my hands, I'm free to just experience. We see this psychology at play in hypno fetishes and fantasies, also a wide variety of scenarios that involve submission. And here's the important distinction. For a lot of gooning enthusiasts, it's not addiction that fuels their maladaptive activity. It's fetishizing or role-playing an addiction that brings the fantasy alive. This is addiction fantasy. Well, wasn't my fault. I was powerless over the addiction. I guess I have no choice but to sit back and enjoy for hours and hours and days. If you're familiar with kink, I know you know this all too well. We pretend to be in dysfunctional or maladaptive situations all the time because it's a hot fantasy. But we know that we're role-playing that in the safe container of kink. I'm not a bitchy, controlling dean that humiliates my university students and, makes them do favors for good grades. I'm just role-playing. I'm not really a bimbo that deserves to be used and discarded because that's the only thing I'm good for in life. That's my fantasy. And maybe I'm not hopelessly addicted to watching spicy videos to the extent where I self-pleasure to extreme lengths. That's just my fantasy, and it is damn hot. And I got to give you another caveat. First, full disclosure, I'm not a licensed psychiatrist or psychotherapist, and diving super deep into the controversy and the existence of porn addiction or sex addiction, that can easily be a whole nother video series. But know that sex and porn addiction has been rejected as a diagnosis by the American Psychological Association, ASECT, and a bunch of others. That's not to say in some circumstances those things can't be part of a compulsive behavior that can be so bad it can seriously disrupt somebody's life. But know that the distinction between what's a true addiction and a compulsive behavior are two very different things, and that can be important. If that piques your curiosity, I encourage you to read more up on it. And so now let's go back to gooning being this hot new sex trend that we've never seen before. No, not really. We've been doing this extreme edging with the fantasy scenario that goes with it, that is based in I'm addicted, I can't help it, for years, decades, even centuries. I mean, not with porn on their phones because, but hieroglyphs, I don't know. Scrolls, maybe. But it's only now, in recent years, that this behavior has a label, an identity that has grown behind it, and communities that have blossomed. Maybe it was isolation during the pandemic that really supercharged it. Or perhaps it was just the natural evolution of our culture that helped make gooning a thing like it is now. Whatever the reason, it's clear. Gooning has become immensely popular. It's still widely misunderstood, but it is here to stay. If this is the first you're hearing about gooning or you've learned something new, head on over to Zipper Magazine, where we have dedicated a whole smorgasbord of content to uncovering the realities around gooning and busting myths too. Check out what JV Marks, a person in the community, has to say about what we are all getting wrong about gooning. Or if you're like, well, I want to find out a little more, Zipper's Guide to the Goonosphere, or right here on YouTube, Goddess Rosie Reed's video all about gooning. And if you have any other kinks, fetishes, or sexual trends that you'd like deconstructed, let us know here in the comments. You know, I'm the editor-in-chief and I've got connections with the Zipper team. Just saying. I'm Sexologist and Kink Educator Sunny Megatron. Until next time, have fun exploring the gooniverse. Bring Kleenex and lube.
Real kink for real people. Brought to you by Sunny Megatron and Clips for Sale.